Welcome to Screw the Commute, the entrepreneurial podcast dedicated to getting you out of the car and into the money. With your host, lifelong entrepreneur and multimillionaire, Tom Antion.
Hey everybody, it's Tom here with episode 65 of Screw the Commute podcast. We got Joel Block here. I've known this guy for a long time, and this guy, I can't wait to hear what he's got to say because he covers all kinds of stuff that I am clueless about, and I'm really excited to hear from him. Now, I hope you didn't miss episode 64, which I covered in one of my Monday trainings. For those of you who are new here, every Monday I do an in-depth training on something that has either made me a lot of money or saved me a lot of money in business. And in that episode on excellence, I showed you how examples of how the pursuit of excellence in whatever you do open doors that I didn't even know were there or existed. So make sure you go back later and listen to episode 64. Now, a real quick announcement. Our podcast app should be ready by the time you hear this. You can check it out at the App Store at Screw the Commute Podcast, and you'll be able to do a lot of cool stuff right on your mobile device with our Screw the Commute Podcast app. All right, now our sponsor is the Internet Marketing Training Center of Virginia, a distance learning school which teaches legitimate techniques to make a great living either working for someone else or starting your own online business, or both. You can check it out at imtcva.org, imtcva.org. And also, while you're over at screwthecommute.com checking out some of our other stuff, I don't want you to get robbed in you or your family's higher education pursuit. So be sure to watch the higher education webinar at screwthecommute.com, and you are going to be mad when you watch it because there's a lot of things that these institutions are doing to you and your children and your nephews and your nieces that's not so swift in causing enormous amounts of debt. So check out that at screwthecommute.com and just click on free webinars. All right, let's get to the main event. Joel Block is a money business insider. Joel's a longtime venture capitalist and hedge fund manager, and he says that's gobbledygook for a professional investor. So when you hear hedge fund, it's I always wonder exactly what that was. So it's a professional investor. He lives in a Shark Tank world, just like on TV. Since selling his publishing company to a Fortune 500 company, Joel keynotes conferences worldwide, delivering business strategies and the inside track for money and success to business executives and their teams. Joel, are you ready to screw?
Tom, I was born ready, man.
The commute, that is. Hey, boy, it's good crossing paths with you again. And our good friend Carolyn De Posada put us back together after many years. I don't know how long it's been since we met, but
she's awesome too. So thank you. Nice to reconnect.
Absolutely. And now you and I have a thing in common. We've both been in successful business, but our paths are totally different. So tell them a little bit about what you do and how you got there.
Well, our paths are different, but they're sort of parallel in a funny way. Mm-hmm. So I started, for 2 years out of college. I was I'm a CPA by my training. I worked at Price Waterhouse. I did a lot of really cool things at Price Waterhouse. I counted ballots for the Academy Awards in 1986.
Wow.
I did tax work for a giant real estate investment company, which is how I learned the business that I'm in now all those years ago. And I hated the tax work, but I just loved reading the partnership agreements. And I said, I knew I wanted to be a deal maker. I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So I quit the firm, and I've been self-employed ever since, which is more than 30 years. So I just went out there and did it. And I have a feeling what you and I have in common, probably as far as a skill, is we're both salesmen. As much as I'm a CPA, I really am a salesman. That's the skill I value the most.
And you don't see that very often.
No, not in financial people, but I wasn't well placed. I really wasn't. Listen, if I didn't quit Price Waterhouse, I'd have been fired for sure, 100%. Because I really, my handwriting was terrible. I didn't get the dimes and pennies in the right columns. I was argumentative. I was rebellious. I wasn't a soldier. and they needed a soldier there, and that just wasn't me. So.
Well, let's go back to that time, because see, a lot of the people that listen to this are thinking about going into business, and they're stuck in that cubicle. They probably hate what they're doing, even if they kind of, it's okay. It's that dream of getting out of there and doing the kinds of stuff that we do. So, do you remember that time and what you were feeling like, and did you actually plan to go out on your own, or was it like a demarcation? I quit and walk out the door. What was it like?
It was closer to the second. It wasn't exactly either one of those, but the junior guy on the team, which was me, the senior guy, who's the 2-year guy who bosses the 1-year guy,
right.
came to me and said, "Hey, listen, Joel, you're not working hard enough." I said, "What do you mean? I'm working, I don't know, 50 hours, 60, whatever, 10 hours a day, whatever it was." And the guy said, "The other guys are working 12. And I said, "This work is boring. All you get is 10 hours if I can't do other work. I mean, if all I'm going to do is this, that's all I can give you." And he goes, "If you don't give us more time, if you don't work more overtime, we're taking you off the job." I said, "If you take me off the job, I'm quitting the firm." And 2 weeks later, I didn't work there anymore. And so in my exit interview, the partner said to me, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well," I said, "I really don't know." I said, "I don't make a lot of money here, so it doesn't really matter. I could sell shoes at Nordstrom." So the point being for listeners is that as a very young man, I didn't have any responsibility. I didn't have any overhead. I didn't have a family. I didn't have anything at that early time. And it was very easy for me to make that decision. It was very, very easy. The more, the farther along you go, the more overhead you accumulate, the bigger your responsibilities get, the harder it is to make this decision. That doesn't mean you shouldn't make the decision, but it just gets it gets a little bit harder as you go.
Well, with all your financial expertise, how would you tell somebody now that you look back that if they did, if they were in a little bit deeper than you were at the time, and they've got to keep their lifestyle up and they've got a family to worry about, how would they plan for this exit now?
Well, number one, I would not jump into the entrepreneur business cold turkey. As much as nobody advocates for the entrepreneur business more than me. I love this business. I think it is the great business. It's a colorblind business. That means that anybody from any background, any race, religion, creed, culture can be successful if you are crystal clear about what you do, if you solve problems. People will pay to make their problems go away no matter what you look like. And that's the beauty. That's the real beauty of America. Now, corporate America, maybe it's a little different. Maybe some other places it's a little different. But the entrepreneur business, there really is a place for everyone.
Even convicted felons.
Well, even convinced, maybe especially, unfortunately, yes. Especially convicted felons.
They have nowhere else to go.
Actually, that kind of brings up, and it's a whole interesting thing that the real problem, the reason they can never really come back into society is they stay in kind of the criminal world is because they can't ever come back in. There's no way for them to get back into society. So, but anyway, what I would tell people is that you have to kind of build a little bit of a safety net, not only a savings account, but maybe you kind of start, you're 100% working for your job. Maybe you go 90-10, that you're 10% on the side, and then 80% you're at the company, and then 20% on the side, and you're kind of weaning it down, eventually 30, 40, 50%, 50-50. Now you're doing entrepreneur work and you're working at the company. So maybe there's a way for you to kind of bleed out that way. The other thing is you have to try to get a handle on your responsibilities. You have to make sure that the family, the spouse, everybody's in sync with what you're doing, because if you want to go out and make money in a different way and they're going to spend the same old way, that could cause you some problems. So you really, the ducks that you have to get in order are not just your financial ducks. You really have to get some emotional stuff under control. And there's a little bit of a roller coaster. I mean, depending on what business you're in, you could sell a lot one month and nothing the next month, and that could be painful. So you really have to get your ducks in a row and be clear about those things.
Now, from like I said, you've got an enormous amount of financial expertise. I mean, I'm good at bringing the money in, but what to do with it when I do it is nothing fancy at all. But what kind of finances should people have set up, and what kind of financial mechanisms should they have set up when they start a business?
Well, listen, you got to do some basic bookkeeping. I mean, you have to keep track of your money. You have to know where your money's going. And one of the things that people do is, okay, I'm not good at this, so I'm just going to turn it over to somebody else. And if they don't pay any attention, those are the people that get a shock of their life at some point in the future. Money's missing, money's gone. They didn't accumulate as much as they thought. It evaporated somehow. And I'm not talking entirely about dishonesty. Just things are not always in reality the same as you perceive them in your mind. And if you're not paying attention, whether you like it or not, you must pay attention, because money is really the way we keep score. It's the scorekeeping mechanism in business. And if you don't pay attention, you're really getting yourself in line for some trouble. So really important to get your bookkeeping under control, whether you do it internally or you have a helper. But you must stay involved at all times. You must look at reports. You must look at bank balances. And if we didn't learn anything else from Bernie Madoff, and I mean, this is all accountants know this. This is not rocket science for accountants, but for everybody else, just because a paper like a report says $500 doesn't mean that it's true or real.
Right.
It could really be negative $500. And money is a very confusing thing, and it's very, very complicated, because what appears is not always so. And I'll give you a quick example of that. Tom, if you took a $100 bill out of your pocket, you went to the bank and you opened a new bank account, what would the bank account statement say right at that moment?
Well, probably $28 after they take all the fees out.
Oh, they're too realistic, too cynical. So let's say it said $100. Okay, let's just say, right. Okay. So it says $100. Let's say now the next day you go open another account. I give you $100 and you go to the bank and you open another bank account. What does that bank say?
Well, it should be $100, right?
Say $100, right? But one, I loaned you the money. The other one is your own money. So, but both of them say you have $100. One of them is not even real.
That's
right.
You
follow me?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not any different. You ever see these guys take pictures of themselves in front of big fancy houses,
of course,
fancy cars,
Learjets and Lamborghinis?
Yeah.
And
I mean, you have no idea if they really own these things or if it's just for show. I mean that's just me asking the question. Other people, ooh and ah and Google and all the other stuff, they're all getting all googly eyed. To me, I'm not impressed by that sort of thing, because you don't even know if it's real. And that's how money is. Money, it's very hard to tell what's real in money. So for your own business, you need to pay a lot of attention. One of the things we learned in accounting school, when I was a youngster, and I haven't done accounting in 30 years, but the training was very good for me, is that every employee is the best auditor of his own paycheck. That, people know how to read their own paycheck. They don't know how to read other people's paycheck, and they don't know how to read other things, but they can read their own paycheck, and they know when they've gotten too much taken out, or they have a sense about these things. And so you have to learn how to read your reports, and you got to get an accountant or a bookkeeper to show you how it works, and you got to get your taxes right. I mean, there's some responsibilities to owning a business.
Yeah, and you got to keep your eye on accounts receivable too, because you might do the job and do a great job at something, expect someone else to follow up and collect the money, and if they don't do it, you're in trouble.
Hopefully, listen, with all the internet, subscription revenue, and all the other things that we all do nowadays, hopefully accounts receivable is minimized. One of the things about these subscription businesses, they don't have accounts receivable.
Right, exactly, and even the government kind of dummied up a little bit in allowing people to pay a certain amount, up to a certain amount, with credit cards, because it used to be wait, for the rest of your life to get paid in any government job you did. So now they can pay up to a certain amount with credit card, and that's worth checking out if you're going to do any business with the government.
Right. I think they can pay $25,000 or something right on the spot, and it's absolutely worth the 3 points you pay to your credit card company, because they hey, listen, otherwise you got to collect the money, you got to wait for the money, you just take the money and don't worry about the discount.
Yeah, but he's given just stellar advice, because there's been plenty of people on this show that have not paid attention, and that was their biggest trouble in business. Bankruptcy. I mean, one guy the other day just moved across country, and his partner turned a non-recourse loan into a recourse loan and stuck him with $7 million in personal debt.
Well, gee,
That's
that's
not
kind of a
paying
bummer.
attention. Yeah, that ruined your whole day, didn't it, buddy?
Yeah, that wrecks your day for sure. Yeah.
So now, have you ever gotten screwed in business? And if so, what'd you do about it?
I have. You can't be in business without having gotten screwed.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, the lessons for me, the only times that it's ever happened is when I let my guard down. I got too comfortable. I got too trusting. I got too something, and I let my guard down, and I wasn't paying attention. And one of the ways you can let your guard down is not just getting too trusting, but getting too arrogant. Mm-hmm. And thinking that you're so smart, thinking that nobody else is as smart as you. When you go down that path, and I've kind of gone down that path a little, not overly, but a little, and I've really learned that that's when you find yourself in some trouble. So I really try to be more humble. I really try to kind of keep my feet on the ground, and I try to stay grounded, because that's how I know. And when that happens, it sort of depends, what the magnitude of the problem is. If the magnitude is big, you have to call an attorney and get help. If the problem is not so big, then you may just have to take it as a tuition payment against your education.
That's a good way to say it. I actually had a little offbeat method one time. So I didn't get the email that one of my main website, Antion.com, was expiring, and then somebody else grabbed it up, and so I just threatened to kill him, and he gave it back to me. So, I don't know if that's they teach that in CPA school. Yeah,
that's probably not the best technique to go on the radio and say out loud. But
I don't mind. That way nobody will steal any of my stuff anymore. Oh man! So anything funny or bizarre happened to you in the course of your business dealing?
God, in 30 years, a lot of bizarre stuff and a lot of funny stuff. I can't. My file system, my electronic file system in my brain doesn't work so generally as just pick a story. But if you got to give me a little more parameter, I guarantee I can think of some funny things that have happened along the way.
Well, what do you like? What do you like best about working for yourself, and what's the worst thing?
Well, listen. I've got a great boss. That's the thing.
Right, brilliant.
My boss is
just
awesome.
Brilliant, genius, right?
Yeah, very, very, very smart, very, very handsome, very polite. Everything. I don't have a bad thing to say about the boss. That's the thing. But that's also the downside. I was saying to my son recently, who was complaining about his job. I said, listen, if you don't like your job, you can do it the way I do it. And it looks so easy. I mean, it's like, God, Dad, it's like you don't have to go into work that much. And although I work a lot. I mean, I do a lot of creative stuff. I mean, I'm thinking all the time about ideas, and I'm coming up with new ideas. But I said, listen, but here's the thing. You have to put up with a lot of crap, but the one main thing is, you're going to get a paycheck at the end of the week. I don't have to put up with a lot of the same stuff, but I don't know that I'm going to get a paycheck at the end of the week. So that's the trade-off. The trade-off is, are you willing to bet on yourself to get the job done? And I am always willing to bet on myself. That's the thing, is you have to ask yourself, when you're going to go in business, are you willing to bet on yourself? Because if you're not, then maybe going in business is not the right answer for you. And you have to really think, is this the right thing for you to do? And for me, it is, because I'm always willing and able to bet on myself. That doesn't mean that I do everything perfectly. Like I can't do any of the internet marketing stuff you do. I think you're so talented, and your marketing, just the way your mind works, is so different than mine. But that kind of makes us a good team too, is that we're different. So I'm very clear about what I'm good at. I've gotten very clear. I'd say until I was 35 or 40, I tried a lot of different things, and I wasn't clear about what I was good at. But as I started to get 40, 42, I started to get more and more clear about what my lane was going to be and what my skills were going to be. And I focus only on those skills. And that's a really important thing for somebody who's just a little bit older, is you got to pick a lane, and you got to focus on it, and you got to get really good at it. One of the things I always say is that money follows expertise, and you have to really know what you're doing, because nobody wants a generalist. Nobody wants you practicing on them.
Right.
Doctors, hey, listen, there's a reason that doctors practice on cadavers. They're low value targets, right?
Right.
I mean, it's okay to
They
practice
never
on
complain. Even.
those. They don't complain, right?
They don't call
like
their
if you make a
insurance
mistake,
agent.
you just start over again. But in business, there's real consequences, and so you want to be very careful that you're really good at what you do. And if you don't know how to do something, instead of practicing on somebody else, work on somebody else's account that's already doing this sort of thing. Kind of learn from them as an apprentice or as a helper in some capacity, and that'll also prevent you from stepping in a pile of trouble.
Yeah, and I agree with your statement about us being a good team but I don't agree with the no paycheck at the end of the week, because if I had a hold of your son, I'd be having residual affiliate programs and membership sites that the money just keeps coming. So
Well,
that's what
listen,
like.
I mean, listen. If he decided to go out on his own, I would probably make him come learn from
Exactly.
you, so he could get himself up and running.
Yeah, there you go. So, so tell us what you're doing. Are you speaking? You selling stuff? What are you doing?
Well, I'm doing a handful of things. They've really always been the same, but I've been in the venture capital and the hedge fund businesses for my whole career. I mean, that's the main thing. I in 1990 started a publishing company, which I raised a lot of money for. Went to Wall Street, sold the services all over Wall Street, and then sold that company to a Fortune 500 in 1995. And then I bought and sold companies. That's kind of been my main thing. And then in the last, in about 2010, started a real estate hedge fund where we were buying, distressed notes and things from banks and buying properties, fixing them up, fix and flip like you see on TV. And then over the last, many years, companies asked me to come speak to them, and one of the things I talk about is how do businesses get the inside track on things? I mean, people in the money business tend to have the inside track. I mean, actually, all of us have the inside track on. There are things that we know how to do. There are people who run great restaurants. What's the inside track on running a great restaurant? What's the inside track on being a great internet marketer like you are? What's the inside track on being successful in fixing and flipping homes? I mean, every business, there's insiders and there's outsiders, and you want to learn from the people who are on the inside that know what they're doing. And so I speak on those kinds of topics. I will tell you, if I can make a little announcement about something that is new.
Absolutely.
It's not my thing. It's a new thing that people have never heard of. I promise them. The government has just released a new tax shelter. It's probably the biggest tax shelter in the history of the United States. And these things are called opportunity zones. This is part of the Trump Job Cut Act. I think it's called TCJA, Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. And they put in there, they really want to move money into lower income, minority type communities. But the government never does a good job of this sort of thing. Never. They never get it right. So they want to give private citizens, generally wealthier people, an incentive to move money into these lower income areas. And before all sorts of people start getting all bent out of shape that rich people get all sorts of benefits, you got to think about how many jobs are going to be created and how much value and how much good worth is going to come into these communities that right now are just languishing and they're starving. And so cities all over the country are doing badly. So what happened is that the government said to the governors of all 50 states, actually I think 51, they said, send us the areas that you want money moved into. And so the governors all sent a list to the IRS. The IRS then compared it to the census, and then they approved 8,700 opportunity zones. So they've given basically wealthier people the incentive to move money into these opportunity zones. And the tax benefit, it's outside the scope of our discussion to go into why it's a really big deal and everything. But let me just promise you, you're going to start hearing about these opportunity zones. It is a huge, huge opportunity. I'm just finishing up a little mini book on this topic to kind of introduce people to it. I mean, we mostly work with the investors, the people that want to move money in, because they're not going to go into these opportunity areas themselves. They're going to go through a fund. So we'll set up a fund, and then people will give money to us, and then we'll take the pool of money and go into those zones. So we take a bunch of people at 100,000 a piece or whatever the number is, and then we can put 20 million into a certain place. That's the way it generally works, and that's what a fund manager does. Is I coordinate the fund and go in and put the money in. But you're going to start hearing about these opportunity zones, and they are really going to be magical. They're going to be good for low-income communities. They're going to be good for wealthier people. It's going to be highly stimulating to the economy, and and there you go. So
well,
it's
that's the inside track. See, they'd have never heard something like that from me.
Oh, believe me, that's the inside track. That stuff. It's not secret. It's not like illegal that I just told you this. But let me promise you, people aren't going to be hearing about this for a couple of years. A couple of years from now, here's what's going to happen. They're going to go, I think I heard something about this on Tom Antion's show like a couple of years ago, and they're going to go back into your archives.
Right.
And you're going to say, that's why you need to listen to my show.
There you
because
go.
I bring you the inside track.
Well, you tell them about your show, too. You also bring them the inside track.
Yeah. Well, my show is called Profit from the Inside. And Profit from the Inside is just, I invite guests that have the inside track, that know how to do things, that bring these kinds of industry insights to business leaders all over the country and even beyond. So it's on iTunes, Stitcher, Profit from the Inside by Joel Block. And it's a cool show. I mean, we've got celebrities, athletes, people that really get to the highest level of their game. And I like to ask these high level athletes, what does it take to get to your level? And what's interesting is there's no secret. It's not like like some secret Einstein formula. They work extra hard. They're clear about what they want to do. They don't fool around. They don't lose focus. They don't get distracted. They just do the work, and they don't complain, and they just do it. All the things that we all do, whine, moan, complain, they don't do that stuff. It's just like, oh, I don't have enough money. Things aren't going my way. They don't sit around doing that, because while you're sitting around doing that, they're practicing, getting better, honing their craft. And so let's just hone our craft and get really good. Entrepreneurs don't have time to sit around and whine and moan. We have time to work hard and do the things we do and get clear and get other people to like our ideas so that we can move forward and monetize them.
Absolutely. That's super great advice, and improve our skills too. That's for sure. That's how those people reach the highest levels. I just thought of something that would be great for, you're the only guest so far that I would even trust with this question. So if people are out there trying to build their business up, but with the idea of selling it, because you said you bought a lot of businesses. So what should they do to prepare if they want to build a business up and sell it in the future? What kind of things should they pay attention to?
That's a complicated question. It's a whole show, really. It's a bigger question than you realize. But let's put it like this. First, there are some businesses that you build to own, and there are some businesses that you build to sell. And a build to sell, you want to build the business to own. Because if you can't sell it, then you're stuck with it. You don't want to own a business that was built to sell and then you get stuck with it, because that's kind of a short-lived kind of a deal. So here's what you want to do. Number one is you want to make sure that the business is really a solid business. You want to try to keep a lot of the expenses, a lot of the junk expenses out of it. So like what a lot of times people will do is they'll put their whole house, like they'll buy the family clothing and they'll do all the family dinners and they'll do, they'll put everything inside the business. And that really is not a good idea. Number one, it's a problem for tax reasons. My accountant said, even though I'm a CPA, I go outside to get my work done. My accountant said to me one time, he said, here's the rule of thumb. Would General Motors put this on their books and records? If the answer is no, then neither should you. And, that may be a little bit harsh, but I think that the principle is pretty sound. So you want to keep a lot of the junk outside of your company. And that's kind of important, because you got to remember what an investor buys, if you want to sell your company, is at the end of the day, they're buying the bottom line, how many dollars are falling to the bottom. And of course, here's the big dichotomy. It is that we don't want a lot of dollars to fall to the bottom because then the government's going to get their hands on our money.
Right.
So we pump all sorts of junk into our businesses that cause very little money to come to the bottom. And then an investor comes along and looks and says, well, gee, nothing came to the bottom. Oh, yeah, well, that's not really true. That's just what I tell the government. What's really true is you don't want to be in that situation. Right. And so, you can listen, if you're going to run your business for 20 years, run it however you want for 20 years. But if you know you're going to sell it a couple years from now, it's going to take you a couple of years to kind of lean out and clean out your books and records and get them straightened out the way that they need to be so that you can show them to an investor. You're going to have to pay some tax. You're going to have to do it correctly as you should be anyway. But, if you haven't been doing it, you need to get corrected when you're ready to sell. So that's the thing. And there are business brokers and investment bankers that do this kind of thing. I never brokered anything. I'm not a broker. I'm a principal, which means that I actually have the money and I actually buy things. So I bought and sold companies, but I don't represent other people as a broker. So, but listen, most accountants know a lot about this, not bookkeepers so much, but accountants, CPAs, investment bankers, and business brokers. Those are the people you go to for help.
Perfect. All right, we've got to take a brief break for our sponsor, but when we come back, we're going to ask Joel what a typical day looks like for him and how he stays motivated. So, folks, look, I'm down on my knees begging you to check out a particular webinar or pass it on to someone who could use it. See, I'm so far down on my knees, the dogs think I'm trying to play with them, all right? You probably hear them barking in the background. But it has to do with higher education. If you're considering getting retrained because you hate what you're doing or you want a better life for yourself and your family, or if you have kids, nephews, nieces, or neighbors who are wondering if they should burn up hundreds of thousands of dollars and then end up broke with mountains of debt and no marketable skills, you just got to watch this webinar. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain from taking a little time out and visiting screwthecommute.com and click on webinars and watch the one on higher education. I'm telling you, it might make you mad when you see some of the things these colleges and universities are doing to these kids. So check that out at screwthecommute.com/webinars. Now let's get back to our great guest. Joel Block is a money business insider and professional investor and keynote speaker. And we want to know, Joel, what's a typical day look like for an investor? You just sitting back with cigars with your feet up looking at the ocean? Is that is that how it works?
Well, I do spend a good amount of time every week doing what you just said.
I knew it.
Because I do have a man cave and I do invite a lot of guys over and I do go to the club and but that's because that's how I think is that's how I relax and I think. I spend a lot of my time thinking. Mm-hmm. And that may sound like a funny thing to people. Like, what do you think about? I mean, I'm thinking about new ideas, new ways to do things, better ways to do things, new people I could talk to, new approaches that I could think of. And like yesterday, I was in a situation I couldn't think of the answer, but today overnight I sleep on it and I wake up with the answer. And so, I spend a lot of time doing that. What I don't spend a lot of time doing, I don't spend a lot of time working per se, like writing papers. I've tried to organize my day. I do spend time on the phone, and when I'm on the phone, you can only do one thing at a time. So I do spend a good amount of time on the phone. But in between phone calls, I'll either dictate some ideas or I'll write some ideas. And I really try to spend at least half my time during my day, at least half of it is thinking time and creative time. And what makes that possible is that my hourly income is high enough that it pays for the other hours that I'm not creating, or the residual money, like you would say, Tom, is, there's enough other money that it allows that to happen. And so when you're first getting started, the way you make that happen is, you have a certain rate that you make. Like if you divide your whole year by the number of dollars you made for the whole year, divide by, let's say 2,000 hours, which is about the number of hours in a year. That's your hourly rate. That's kind of what I call the yield on your time. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the goal is to keep getting that number to go higher and higher and higher. And, years ago, I remember hearing Jay Abraham say he made $5,000 an hour. And I was like, God, how's that possible? Well, no company gives him $5,000 an hour. That's not really what happens. What happens is you get to a point where you say, listen, I'm really, really good at solving certain kinds of problems. So, give me, I'm not even going to take an hourly rate anymore. Just give me a percentage of the savings or a percentage of the gain that I help you create. And because it doesn't take a lot of time for him to do that, when you divide that, the amount of dollars he gets by the amount of energy put in, the yield on that is $5,000, and it can be higher than $5,000 an hour. Believe me. So, and that's how I do it too, is a very similar kind of way to that. And so, you don't get that number of dollars every minute of your day, but when you get that kind of money, it allows you to have the flexibility to be creative and think of more ideas. And so, as you're thinking about going in business and you're thinking about leaving one opportunity into another opportunity, you're going to ease out like I talked about earlier. You really have to think, how can you increase your yield? That's the overall number of dollars that you make per hour. And it's not from working more hours. It's from being smarter. And that's really the trick. And, keep listening to Tom Andion and some other guys and learn how to be smarter, because that's the name of the game.
Well, yeah, and the advice is spot on, because I got a guy, I think he's a billionaire. He's very low key, behind the scenes guy, buys and sells companies. And he was at his house one time having dinner, and he said, Tom, you should just be sitting at the pool thinking. 'Cause I'm pretty blue collar and hands, I got my hands in everything and learning this and that. And he said, man, you got to back off of that. You've got to think more, just think. And so I'm doing my best to wean away from that. But
I'll tell you what, I got an idea for you then.
All right.
You need to get away from the ranch or whatever the place you call your place.
Right.
And you need to come out to my place. We need to sit around and we need to think together. We'll have some cigars. We'll sit at the club. We'll just think, and spend a whole day. I have guys come out all the time. I got a guy coming from the Midwest later this week, and we're just going to sit and spend a couple hours. So the first half of the day, we'll brainstorm, and then I'll invite a group of other guys to come out. So I got many guys. We put a lot of guys together. We're kind of masterminding. We're different guys from different perspectives. And believe me, you can't leave a session like that without lots and lots of ideas. And we should do that with you. You ought to come out one of these days.
Yeah, get me fired up for sure. So how do you stay motivated?
First of all, what choice do you have? I mean, I'm just a positive person. I don't worry. It's not to say I don't have concerns, but worry is not a positive action. Like nothing good ever came out of worrying.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So I don't sit around and worry. I don't sit around and complain, because those are not positive actions that are moving me in the direction that I want to go. How do I stay motivated? I love what I do. That keeps me motivated. I just really enjoy what I do. I dedicate, probably 2/3 of my time to my business, and maybe 25% or a third of my time is to not-for-profit activities. I mean, service. Mm-hmm. We just lost President George Bush, who was a big service provider. I mean, he donated his time to different causes, and he believed in service. And I think I saw something this morning that said that you can't be a successful person if you don't do service. And I believe that. I wouldn't say it as eloquently as him, but I really do believe that it's fulfilling personally. It makes you feel better about yourself. It makes you a more interesting person. It makes you a person that people respect. And I think it makes you somebody that other people want to work with. I was the chairman of the board of the Los Angeles Boys and Girls Club for several years, and the LA Boys and Girls Club, it's a big club here in Los Angeles. And it was good for me. It was good for me to do that, and it makes people feel good about me in general, just knowing that I did that.
It was good for all those boys and girls that needed you too.
You know what? 100% it was, and it just all the way around. It was good for everyone. In fact, I just had a breakfast the other day with the executive director, who was, she ran the day-to-day affairs of the club, and as the chairman, my job was to raise money, and we had some pretty high-level powwows, a lot of political people and attorneys and accountants on our board, and and so our job was to bring money into the club so she could run a good program, and and we were sort of like partners. I ran the outside, she ran the inside, and that's the way it worked. And it was a great concept.
Wow, this has been quite eye-opening and quite a different episode for all the listeners out there. It's been really, really great. Do you have any parting thoughts we call them our screwballs, the people that listen to this episode, and the people that either want to take their business to the next level or get started? What's your parting thoughts for them?
The entrepreneur business is a great business, and there are a lot, part of what I do. There's a lot of tools that I use. And you know what, Tom? I'll send you my resource guide if you want to publish the resource guide.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes for everybody. Sure,
yeah, I think people would really enjoy it. I don't really take commissions on things. There may be a couple places where there's like an affiliate thing, but I don't really like to do that sort of thing. I just like to kind of purely recommend things. And these are my favorite tools. I have this electronic voice recording assistant that transcribes all my my meetings and all my activities. Creates highlights, word clouds and stuff. I have this thing that auto-populates phrases and things that I like that just save me a lot of time. I think that entrepreneurs, we have to operate at 20 times productivity compared to our corporate counterparts. In fact, one of the things that I say when I speak to audiences is that, the entrepreneur business does not have room for Schamschlagers. And I'll talk about Schamschlagers for a few minutes, and then somebody will eventually raise their hand and say, well, what is a Schamschlager? And so, the word Scham in German means foam, and Schlager means to beat, and so what it means is it's the story. A client of mine told me the story. It was the funniest little thing. He says a little old guy is in the bathtub, and he starts flailing his arms, flapping his arms as fast as he can, and the bubbles start going up. Next thing you know, there's 12 inches, 14, 16, 20 inches of bubbles all around. In fact, you could barely see his head. There's so much bubbles in the bathtub. And he's all proud of himself. He gets out of the bathtub. He dries himself off. 5 minutes later, he turns around and looks at the bathtub, and what's left in the bathtub? Nothing. There's nothing left in the bathtub, and that's a Schamschlager. It's somebody that works all day long, and at the end of the day, what they accomplish? Nothing. And the entrepreneur business does not have room for Schamschlagers. We have to really produce because our family is counting on us. And then I've said to some of these corporate, companies where I speak, and I'll say, you guys have any Schamschlagers here? And one time this guy raised his hand and said, we're the training and breeding ground for Schamschlagers everywhere. So, that's the thing, is that you have to learn to be productive. And so a lot of these tools and resources, I'm sure you have plenty of them. I have plenty of them. We need to operate at incredible productivity because we have so much to do in order to, make it happen for our families. And so I'm happy to share this. I'll send it to you by email and you can post it.
Absolutely. We'll put it in the show notes. And I totally agree with the productivity thing. I wrote a book on how to automate your business, and just one of the little tools that saved me we figured out 9 million keystrokes, over the years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
these are the things you got to put into play, and they're inventing new stuff every day. This is the greatest time in the world to be in a small business.
It's unbelievable. We're so lucky to be alive at this time. What a great time. So, these tools are awesome. In fact, there's one company called Text Expander. They're a great company. They any repetitive phrases and other things that you need to do, they handle it for you.
Yep.
And I get a report from them at the end of every month. You used our service 500 times this month, which saved you 6.5 hours.
Exactly.
And it's like, it's real. It really is real, because otherwise I would have been copying, pasting, going back to a Word document to pull out a phrase or a paragraph and drop it in. And now it's just done. It happens so fast, and it really frees me up so that I can sit in the backyard or go to the club and I can think. And do the things that are really productive. That's my highest level activity is thinking. I'm not writing letters. I'm thinking about ideas, and I'm relaxing. And everybody thinks, oh, Joel, you relax and you vacation so much. And no, you know what? That's true. I do have a really good life, and that's great. But I'm thinking. I'm busy thinking about how I can solve problems that people have.
And that's what we all do to make our businesses thrive. So, Joel, thanks so much, man, for coming on. And this has been a unique episode, folks. You go back and listen to this over and over and over again. And we'll have you on again one of these days for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for those of you new here, please subscribe, give us a review over to iTunes. That'd be great. If you don't know how to do it, we have instructions for you over at screwthecommute.com. We'll have Joel's fantastic resource list in the show notes. This is episode 65, so it'd be screwthecommute.com/65. We'll take you directly to all his stuff. If you need a keynote speaker, or if you're in a company that does, make sure you contact Joel. What's the best place to contact you?
JoelBlock.com is probably the best place to start, and everything is there.
Good. JoelBlock.com. So thanks again, and I'll catch y'all on the next episode.